Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory now forever. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Welcome everyone to Moral Theology 5, Chapter 5. And chapters are a little longer at the end because the commandments that we are looking into are major commandments. So we have honor your father and mother last time. This time we're going to have you shall not kill. We might not be able to finish all of it. There's a lot to be talked about morally for this one. You shall not kill is the sixth commandment in our counting. And it goes like this. And it's the sixth commandment in the Exodus and Deuteronomy, but the Lord actually had made a point on it in the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus giving a new law for the Christians. And as we said before, the new law does not abolish the old, but actually complete it, perfect it, expand it, makes it perfect. You have heard that it was said to men of old, that's Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. That's Matthew chapter 5. You shall not kill, and whoever kills shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. And he goes on to say, whoever says Raka will be liable for the council, and whoever says fool will be liable for hellfire. The points we have is the first one is the respect for human life. This is all the commandments about shall not kill, is about respect of human life, that we have to give human life its place of honor. We have few points to talk about this. So the church and the Bible say what about killing? First thing, we have the first murder in the Bible, that's Cain murdering Abel out of anger and envy. And then immediately God is asking about Abel. The answer, he asked Cain to answer for his brother murder. So God held Cain responsible for the murder of his brother. It didn't pass. And I had a person call me yesterday, the day before, and said, it just got my attention that Cain felt some kind of guilt because when God asked Cain, where's your brother? He doesn't say, what is it? I saw him in the field and killed him. What's the big deal? You notice that he actually is trying to hide, trying to cover the crime. He feels the guilt. So where is this guilt coming from? So we talked a little bit about what we call the, what's the answer? How you answer this? When somebody asks you this question, says, where did Cain get the feeling of guilt? Well, there was nothing about do not kill. This do not murder came later in the time of Noah. So where Cain got the idea that killing is actually a bad thing, evil? Where do you think he got it from? Okay, simple. If you have looked into the course, you will know that we have what we call the eternal law, right? And out of the eternal law came two types of law. Remember those? Eternal, and then two types. What are the first one? Natural law, and then the other one is revealed law. And under revealed law, we have actually a lot of documents. The Ten Commandments, the New Testament law, the civil law, they're all under revealed law. But the natural law is where? Where do we find it? In the conscious of humans. All humans have it. So Cain was able, not able, this is like a bun. Cain could feel guilt because he knows inside of him that he had done something bad, evil. This is the first one we hear about in the Bible. The second killing we hear about is God forbidding the killing of innocent humans in the time of Noah because they were made in his image, and the spilling of blood. And in the time of Noah, God said the murderer should be punished with death. And this is what he said to Noah, for your life blood, I will surely require a reckoning. I would have to hold somebody responsible if they spill the blood of somebody. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. That's the reasoning given in Noah, that human blood should never be spilled for any reason, except for, in this case, shedding of blood. The Old Testament considered blood as a sacred sign of life. Um, and whenever sin was to be forgiven, the shedding of blood of animals was required. It remains as such for all times. It's not less now. Shedding blood in the Old Testament was a big deal, and today is. In the Sermon on the Mount, the Lord expanded the sin of murder to include hatred, unjustified anger, and even indifference towards others' feelings. He asked to love the enemy and to give and not expect a return, forgive and turn the other cheek. That's the other side of the law. The law said not to kill. The other side is actually to love and to forgive and to give. Now, there come a question. So what about self-defense? What if one wants to kill me or kill my children? Am I still under the commandment of not kill? The act of self-defense can have a double effect. What are the double effects of self-defense? Preventing my own death, but causing the death of someone else. One of them is intentional. I intend to defend myself. I don't want to die, which is legitimate. The other one is not intentional. If in the course of me defending my own life, somebody else's die because they want to kill me, then that is not a crime. We got that? Because again, go back to the intention, the goal, the end of what I'm doing is not actually to kill somebody. The end is to preserve a life. In the course of preserving a life, somebody else die. That's so this you can apply also to many other situations. Using more than necessary violence in self-defense is unlawful. Like you do more than what you need to for protecting yourself. But abstaining from moderate self-defense is not necessary for salvation. Like to be saved, I don't have to be a doormat. I don't have to be a martyr to be saved. God didn't ask me to die and not defend myself if need be. The defense of others' lives is the duty of the civil authority. Civil authority should be armed or should use armed forces to defend the communities entrusted to them. It's not a sin for the country to go and put an army together with weapons of killing, like give them guns and cannons and planes with bombs to do what? To preempt, to defend the civil or the community under their protection. So this is about self-defense. What about capital punishment? That's a question that everybody's asking. How about capital punishment? It's a very difficult one to answer because in the book of Genesis, God said to Noah, whoever kills someone by humans should be killed. That's the Old Testament. And New Testament doesn't seem like that. The New Testament actually, there is one person who died for all of us so that we can be forgiven. So from the protection point of view, if the civil authorities, the government, finds it impossible to protect the rights of the human beings under its protection without killing someone, they would have to kill him. They would have to kill him. In the old times, they didn't have enough resources to keep imprisoned people. So what are you going to do? You cannot let them loose, and at the same time, you cannot imprison them. So what are you going to do? In certain circumstances, when people are so bent on evil, then they would have to get rid of them. The punishments should target the remedy of the offender. So this is always the case. We always have to first seek to heal the person, because we know from the church point of view, people who kill or have grave sins, they are sick spiritually and sometimes psychologically sick, unless they are in self-defense, like we said. So in this case, the punishment should actually first seek to heal them. There's an expiation. I've heard few stories about this in Egypt, actually, when a couple of young men were executed for something. And recently there was actually one person that I heard of, and they showed remorse and regretfulness of what they had done, and they accepted their own death. In this case, it became an expiation, like to wipe away their own sins. And it could be considered a penance for them. But the dignity of a human person is not lost even after they commit bad sins. You cannot say a human being is not a human being, is an animal. If they kill, if they are serial killers or rapers or whatever, they're still human being. We cannot change that. There is nothing to be changed about their essence. And they are still the image of God, even after committing very serious crimes. Although capital punishment was an acceptable mode of punishment to protect society against certain criminal actions, the development of detention systems, whenever there is other means, might actually shed or allow for a different approach. Whenever there is means of protecting the society, capital punishment should be avoided in hope of redeeming the guilty. Even if you imprison him for 30 years, 40 years, whatever the time is, there's hope that the person might actually change to the better if you put them in the right circumstances. The problem is sometimes in the stories that we hear about, they go into prison and there's more, it can be more sickening to be there than actually helping. Sometimes that's the case, and some stories had put this up as a potential result. But the goal should be always to heal whatever wrong is in the killer. So that's capital punishment. Let's talk about homicide, the murder. The sixth commandment forbid the killing of another person or the cooperation with the murderer. Both of them are guilty, actually equally guilty. There's different terms. Infanticide. What's an infanticide? Infanticide. Insecticide. What's an insecticide? What's an insecticide? A chemical that kills insects. So infanticide, what's that? Killing babies, born babies. I'm not talking about abortion. Born babies. Fratricide, what's that? I just had a very, like last year, I had a very rich exposure to a Turkish show done on the time of the Ottomans, the Ottoman Empire. They were practicing fratricide. What's fratricide? Fraternity. What's fraternity? Brotherhood. Killing a brother or a sister. In the Ottoman Empire, to prevent their decline, because they were afraid. The big sultan, one of them, forgot what was Solomon. He came up with this idea. I said, if he looked around and saw that all Europe, the kingdoms were weakened by division. Two brothers will tear the kingdom apart and weaken the kingdom. So he said, to prevent this, let us keep one brother and kill the others. So what he's saying, the heir will keep for himself one brother. Why? Just in case that heir doesn't have children. So he keeps his brother as a backup. But the rest of the brothers, he kills in the morning of his coronation. They have to kill him. They kill all of them. And they used to kill them with ropes, strangulate them with silk ropes. They send their servants and they kill them in their own bedrooms. That's fratricide. How about parricide? Killing parents. Or killing a spouse. We don't have a Greek name for that one. So infanticide, fratricide, parricide, or killing a spouse are especially grave. Why? Because the nature of the bond that they violate. You know, killing somebody that you're not related to is one thing, but killing somebody that you're supposed to be his own family member or her own family member, it's a little bit, it's another story. It's a totally different concept. We hear about this a lot in the media about mother killing her kids or a father killing his spouse and his kids, or a brother kills his sister and his parents, and all that stuff is a very tough one to swallow by society and morally also because of the bond. They break that bond and go beyond the breaking of the bond of to murder. Public health should not practice eugenics. What's eugenics? A term is invented by the Nazis. What's eugenics? The Nazis practice eugenics. And the public health in Germany approved it. What's eugenics? Is ethnic cleansing. We go down here, I have those terms explained here in the killing one's children, killing one's siblings, killing one's parents, sterilization actually, sorry, not killing, sterilization of a certain ethnic group. The Nazis used to sterilize the Jews, and who else they sterilized? They had two groups they actually sterilized. The Jews, they killed the Polish, and I'm not sure if they sterilized the Polish too, but they killed the Jews. They sterilized the Jews and killed them to make sure that they don't have any children. That's called eugenics. To turn them eunuchs, to turn them, eu means unable to be fertile. So public health should not practice eugenics, even if it was ordered by the government. Nazis ordered it. The public health department in Germany applied it. And they said this is the, this is have to have more kids for the fit, they said, and less for the unfit. Guess what? The woman who started Planned Parenthood have this saying in on her own website. She put it there. More for the fit, less for the unfit. Means we're gonna try to bring down the number of kids born to unfit parents. She means well, I guess. The sixth commandment forbid the exposing of someone to mortal danger, as well as refraining from helping someone in mortal danger. Like, we don't really put somebody in danger. It's like someone would go and do something crazy, putting everybody in danger. Like, example, a friend who goes to a party, get drunk, and drive his friends back home. What's happening here? He's exposing them to mortal danger. And the friend who's supposed to be with them should have told them not to drive and find somebody else to drive, or they drive themselves. And this is actually, in this case, I'm putting both of them together, refraining from helping someone in mortal danger. Although the unintended killing of someone is not immutable, like if somebody not drunk, nothing, happening to them, hit somebody with the car because the other person was drunk and trying to cross the street, it's not really, he's not accountable morally. It's a sin if they are negligent. So I would say the negligence maybe can come from he didn't have their headlights on, or participated in any way to the happening or the occurring of the accident. We come to the abortion part because that's something, and I think this is one of the biggest issues. Abortion. Here, I want to just make sure that human life starts from conception. That's the biggest biggest issue. Once we define that human life starts from conception, from the time the ovum and the sperm come together to become a human being, then we are going to agree. Human life should be protected and respected from the moment of conception. And there's many verses in the Bible and many places in the Bible that shows us this. There is a place in Jeremiah says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, not before you were conceived, I consecrated you." So God is saying to Jeremiah, "I consecrated you in the womb of your mother. I anointed you with the Holy Spirit. My frame," Job in his book says, "my frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately wrought in the depth of the earth. While the Lord was few days old, embryo, Saint Elizabeth recognized Saint Mary as the mother of my Lord." Once a woman is pregnant, she is a mother. It is actually important to understand that church from the first century, and many documents of the church had forbid abortion by all means. "You shall not kill the embryo by abortion and shall not cause the newborn to perish." Infanticide and abortion are prevented by the church, and the documents are, I'm going to tell you which documents this is in 33, the Didache, the earliest documents of the church, Didache, the Epistle of Barnabas, the Epistle of Diognetus, Tertullian. There's a lot of church fathers who actually said this is a grave sin. It's a murder by all definitions. And I just think it is very tough to think of a government or a system or a regime or a society who tries to define this as not a sin. It's really sad and it's really shocking. You know that the statistics says since the 1960s, since Roe versus Wade, 70 million babies were killed. 70 million murdered. And the number is actually more than what was killed in World War II. In the church, deliberate abortion, that's not caused by, it's caused by a deliberate action, intentional, suffers the penalty of excommunication for 1 year. A 1 year time, the person who's responsible for the abortion, whether it is the mother or the mother and the father, or the father being the one who's pushing for it, or whoever it is, will suffer an excommunication of 1 year. This is exactly the amount of time the church gives to a murderer. The right to life is a fundamental right. We cannot say an inalienable right, means nobody can be deprived of it. And it should be protected by the government. Can you imagine the government does not protect the life of weak people and say they're weak or poor, we don't need to protect their lives? What does that mean? What kind of government is this? So it should be protected by civil authority. Prenatal diagnosis, now we move a little bit further. Let's say that someone, and I heard this a lot from mothers. They come to me and say, my doctor sent me to a genetic counselor. What's a genetic counselor? They check, especially if the mother is a little old, they say she has a very high risk of Down syndrome. So let's check the baby. So I'm gonna ask. So they say we're gonna take some blood, and to be more sure, they take amnion, the little liquid around the baby. And I asked the question, so what happens if they find that you have a baby with Down syndrome? What are you going to say? What is the result? And they say they will recommend and they will show me a place to do what? To abort the baby. Then why do it? To start with, because we're not going to abort that baby. Down syndrome or no Down syndrome. That is a very sad thing to think about. So prenatal diagnosis is morally acceptable if it's only meant for healing and protecting the life and health of the embryo and the mother. But if it's meant to decide we should kill the child or not, the baby or not, why we do it? It's futile. And it just causes an anxiety. And then the last piece is it's against human dignity to manipulate chromosomal or genetic materials for non-therapeutic purposes. Sometimes now they're able to do this, to actually change certain genes or chromosomes. to produce human beings with certain sex or predetermined qualities. Like we want a girl, let's do the chromosomes, and we can fix the ovum that will produce a girl, or we can do them to have a strong immune system, or we can have them have certain mental abilities or whatever, unless it is actually to heal the person. So genetic engineering or genetic counseling or genetic engineering can be used to help the health of the human being, but not to determine their gender or their qualities. We should not do that, not to play with them. That's why the church will condemn any playing around with the chromosomes or the genes of the human being that is not directed to healing diabetes or congenital problems or hereditary problems. Maybe that's acceptable, but the other side is not acceptable. That's against the dignity of human beings. We come to another hot topic, which is euthanasia. What's euthanasia? So euthanasia is the killing of, yes? We talked about this before. I can't hear you. Again, we're going to say this. So what's she defending herself against? No, we say it's okay to kill somebody if we're defending ourselves. Sometimes, I'm just going to say this. Being raped does not make abortion not a sin. There's two different things, and we should not be mixing them together. The fact that she has them, both of them, that's actually very bad and very sad for her. But being raped does not make abortion not a sin. Maybe it is not as guilty as someone who's doing it with no violence involved. Does that make sense? Like somebody who steals because they're hungry. Is it not stealing? No, it's still stealing, but we can understand. It's not as guilty as somebody who is stealing to get rich, if that makes sense. So abortion is abortion, no matter what the reasons are, unless there's something here. And again, it's still abortion, by the way. When we say the mother is so sick, she's going to die. If she doesn't deliver, if she doesn't terminate the pregnancy, we call it pregnancy termination, she's going to die. She has some heart condition. Some cases it's like that. Here, abortion is not intended. What is the intention? Is the preservation of the mother's life. Abortion becomes a side product of this. Just let us be in moral issues, we have to be clear. So for example, suicide, we're going to talk about suicide now. Are all suicides the same? Not really. We're going to talk about that. So lives of persons who are diminished or weakened, terminally ill, should be respected and protected. Direct euthanasia is the putting end of the weak life of terminally ill, handicapped, or sick person, morally unacceptable. It's immoral. There was a man, it's before your time, way before your time, an Armenian doctor, his name Dr. Kevorkian. Heard about him? Kevorkian was in the news because he was helping sick people, cancer people, terminal people to die. So it can be an act. So what he was used to do is give them medicine. They give them medicine, they bring them into a room, quiet room, nice music, nice pictures, you know, scenery and stuff. And they would give them an injection, lethal injection, and with some anesthetic. And they sleep and they die. They never wake up. And he was sued. And his case was very all over the place. And the government, the country said, no, we're not going to adopt that place. We're not going to go there. There was a lot of fighting from the Christians against that. The euthanasia can be an act or an omission of an act. Like when you actually take away from people their food and their drink and their medications that they need to kind of survive. Say, for example, you take the medicines from someone who has clotting, and they develop blood clots everywhere in their brain and their heart, and they die because we took away the medicine from them. That's an act of euthanasia, or by omission. I'm sorry, that's an omission of care that needed for them to be surviving. So it can be an act or an omission of an act. Discontinue. So you talk about, so what kind of things that I can take away from the person, and I would not be considered a murderer. Discontinuing medical procedures that are, listen to this is important for you. So you might have this happening around you, and this is important to understand. And this is where people come to me to ask, my grandfather is in the hospital. He's on a ventilator, and he has terminal cancer, and he's about to die. But the doctor said he might take too long in dying, and they're asking us if we can take off the machine. So what are you going to say? They're going to die. So discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, too much. A lot of money, a lot of care, but not only that, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. Like, for example, I know that this grandpa will never recover, will never come out of it. But he's going to be on the machine as long as we keep him, because now we have the ability. They can shock the heart, start it over again. They can support the ventilation. They can support the kidney by dialysis. They support a lot of things. The lung is not functioning. We have a ventilator. The heart is not functioning. We give a lot of medicines. The kidney is not functioning. We have a dialysis. So you can replace a lot of functions of the body. But we know that this is not temporary. This is going to be for as long as we keep it. There is no outcome. We're not talking here about making somebody's life better. We're talking about no hope. We're just doing what? We're just delaying the inevitable. It's going to happen. In this case, the intention is not to cause death, but to accept the inability to impede it. We're not actually killing anybody in this case. We know that this is going to happen. We're just doing what? Prolonging it. It's going to happen. So we're not actually causing death. We're not killing anybody. Death is working so hard, we're forcing it to stand back. And there is no murder in that. We're not causing death. The decisions to hold certain procedures should be determined by the patient himself, if competent and able. If the patient is unable, the decision should be made by the representative, whomever the patient chooses, that durable power of attorney. That's why healthcare systems now, and I encourage everybody to do the same, they design someone for them to be the one to speak in case they are not able to speak for themselves. So if things came to the worst stage, someone else have to speak on their behalf. And there's a lot of scenarios about that. And by the way, when the thing like this happen, the hospital, every hospital have an ethics committee, moral committee. They come together because this is a decision not single person can carry and live with. It's very big. So you get the oncologist, you get the intensive care doctor, you get the nurse, you get the ethics representative, you get the chaplain, you get the family members, and they all come together and they discuss what are the possibilities, what are the options, what can we do? And every one of them would say, this is what I think is going to happen. And at the end, the representative of the patient have to say, I agree with the plan, or I want this to be done, or I don't want my father to be withdrawn from the machine. I want to keep him. And they will give advice not against that, but then they will let it happen. At no time, listen to this, no time, basic care should be withdrawn. What we talk about basic care, food and water. At no time, no matter what you decide, you should not deprive anybody from feeding and from water. Unless, and this happens sometimes, giving food and water will cause death. It's the opposite. Like somebody who has, for example, a little connection between their esophagus and their lung. You put the water and the food, it goes into their lung. You need to have a surgery to block this connection. But if you give them food and water, they will suffocate and die immediately. In this case, even food and water would not be possible because it's going to cause death. Now, what about painkillers? I told you about my story about with this. Painkillers. Would painkillers be withdrawn because we're afraid that somebody might die? Using painkillers to alleviate suffering of the dying is in conformity with human dignity, even with the risk of shortening the life of the dying. So you say, like I told you the scenario about this woman, and I said it in the very beginning of Moral Theology. I said, this old Jewish lady in the intensive care screaming, and she is terminal. She's 90 some and terminal, screaming, screaming, screaming. I will never forget her scream. You will never forget it if you attend it for a whole night, you know, second in and second out. Screaming, screaming, screaming until it drives you crazy. You want to run out of the hospital, run out of your skin. And you can't do anything about it because you give her pain medicine, she will die. She has a DNR, do not resuscitate order on the chart, meaning you cannot put her on ventilator, you cannot give it, do anything for her. The minute she stops breathing, she's dead. That's it. And we know that morphine, painkillers, will suppress breathing and will put down the last mechanism she has to breathe, which is her conscious. She breathes because she's conscious. So nobody wanted to respond. And I remember that night, and I said, okay, we cannot leave this woman in this suffering. She's suffering big time, you know, screaming. It would drive anybody crazy for just 1 minute. So I said, the attending doesn't want to answer. He knows. The doctor at that time that was taking care of her didn't want to even answer the phone for her or for anybody else. So they asked, and I said, okay, we usually give 5 milligrams of morphine. She's nothing. Give her 2. Okay. And I was like, in my mind, I know that this might end her life. She got the 2 milligrams, and maybe 30 minutes later, she was comfortable, breathing nice, normal. And she was awake. And then another half an hour, she was so comfortable, she slept. She never woke up. So is that killing? Why? According to the rule that we just established, the intention of administering pain killing is not to kill her. It's actually to comfort, right? And it's actually our duty to comfort the dying, not to leave them, because actually it's a sin to leave somebody in pain and just watch them and say, I don't want to feel guilty, I don't want to kill anybody. That's not right. So as long as ending life is not the end of the means of the use of the painkillers, I'm not trying to end her life. I'm not trying actually to use it to end their life. Palliative care is an act of charity. It's needed, required. Palliative care means easing pain. You know, palliative care, what is the Center for Palliative Care called? There's a name for it. A place, a house for palliative care? I'll put it here in parentheses so you know what I'm talking about. Hospice. I think with an S. Huh? S-C-I-C-E. So hospice. Feeding tube for terminal L, it should be given as long as we can. Feeding, as long as it's not going to risk their lives, we should give them food and drink. There is no reason to cut down the food and drink. If they're going to die, they're going to die. We just you don't want anybody dying from hunger or speeding their death because they're hungry and we're watching them. So what about ventilators? Here's something about ventilators. Okay, is ventilators, remember the 3 things and I highlighted them? I highlighted them, 4 things: burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate. Those are the things that we don't have to do. We can discontinue. Is a ventilator burdensome, extraordinary? Well, in at UNC or Chapel Hill or Raleigh, it's not really. Ventilators become very much everyday work, everyday care, like food and drink. If you go to Kafr Abu Tisht in Egypt and ask about ventilator, what would that be? definitely extraordinary, burdensome, dangerous, and because nobody there knows how to use them, they don't have them. To get a ventilator in a very remote area in a small village is going to be a very difficult thing. Are we required to do it? No. Okay. And if it happens and a person is on it, we can take it off. So this is about circumstances. Can we afford this and can be done or it's not? I mean, in the villages in Egypt, they don't have feeding tubes. They cannot feed the person on, so they cannot eat on their own. There is no way to feed them. They cannot drink on their own. They cannot give them water. So we talked about painkillers. Now let's talk about suicide. A person's life, first of all, and this is something I need to say to everybody, our life and our body is not our own. We need to check that and correct that. In a country that worship freedom and the Statue of Liberty is our symbol, we have a tendency to think we own our life, we own ourselves, we own our body. I have the freedom to do whatever I want with it. That is not the church way of thinking, nor the Bible. We are not our own. We don't own our lives. We don't own our bodies. That has to be very clear. By right of birth, we belong to the Creator. By baptism, our bodies belong to Christ. So if you want to think about it, your first birth from your mother makes you a person belonging to the Creator. That your life. Our bodies being in baptism was bought by Christ to be a place for the Holy Spirit. So our life is not our own. It belongs to God as a sovereign creator. A person is merely a steward for life. I'm responsible for my life, so I can do the best with it and bring it back to God with my kids, with my friends, with the whole people that I know. I'm not an owner. It also belongs to the family and the church and the society. My soul belongs to all of them. I owe them where I belong as a daughter, as a mother, as a sister, as a friend. They have something in me. Taking that's taking one's life is a grave sin against God and deeply injures the ties one has with the community. You don't know how much it hurts. Maybe you know if you had seen it once. I've seen it many times. When people commit suicide, it really destroy the family, the parents, the brother, the sister, everybody. And they need a lot of counseling to get over this. So it's a grave sin against God and deeply injures the ties one has with the community. If committing suicide is done, listen to this, as model for other young people, and this happens. In addition to being a grave sin against God and the community, it's also what we call a scandal. We're going to talk about scandal in the next commandment. Scandal, athara. Committing suicide because of intractable clinical major depression and anxiety or under severe threats lessens the moral responsibility of society. The same thing. So people who are deeply depressed and to the degree of psychotic depression that leads them to committing suicide are not morally responsible for the suicide as someone who's doing it out of other reasons. So we have to be clear about that. So the church actually recognizes that if somebody's been diagnosed or known or suspected to have major clinical depression and commit suicide, church pray over them. We'll pray for them and ask forgiveness because they have done it with not what is the key element? What's the key element in any moral responsibility? We talked about this in the very beginning. What makes a moral issue evil or good? And how much evil, how much good it is? The degree of responsibility. Free, well, if they have freedom, a major depression person in clinical depression who are gone to the extreme cases of depression, they are not free. So it's intractable major clinical depression and anxiety or severe threats. The church prays for those persons. And that's what I have for you today. We're going to have to finish The other part of we're going to talk about also our responsibility. We're going to talk about what it means to be a scandal for somebody, whether in killing or in the do not commit adultery. That sometimes people think I'm not responsible for anybody. I hate this. As if we are out of nowhere. We're living in a desert. I'm not responsible. What do you mean you're not responsible? You say it or you don't say it, you are. And that's where Jesus comes in and says, whoever stumbles, one of those little ones that believes in me, it's better for him to hang himself with a millstone and drown himself in the sea. We are responsible. Whether we say it or we see it, or we don't say it or we don't see it, we all are responsible for one another. There is no way that we can stand before Christ and say, I don't care. He did this. I'm not responsible. Jesus will say, no, you are. If you had done something to lead him to the sin and lost his life and lost his salvation, you are responsible. You are responsible for your, like Cain and Abel, he say, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, you are. All right. Any questions there? Is it morally okay to let the Coptic family, power of attorney, to decide about ventilator and feeding tube? Yes, it is. They can, and just for the doctors and the priests and the counselors to know, it's in the cases of no hope of good outcome. Like if the person is going to die, it's going to die, and we're just prolonging that process. It is okay to withdraw the care. Feeding tube is okay as long as it doesn't really causes more harm or damage. Okay. Any other questions? Let's pray. Make us worthy, Lord, say thankfully, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, power, and glory now. May the love of God the Father and grace of his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. Peace be with you.